few years ago, a young fellow in Peterborough named Ramsden was postering for his band, and he was arrested by the police for putting up posters on public property. Normally, people went to court, pleaded guilty, paid the fine. This fellow was made of sterner stuff than I am. Perhaps he had deeper pockets than I do. My pockets aren't deep at all. However, he took it to court and he fought. And in Ontario, they found against him, but he took it all the way to the Supreme Court of Canada. And the Supreme Court of Canada defended the right of people without access to mainstream media, meaning magazines, newspapers, radio, television, whatever, the web. In other words, without the big bucks to pay for this, defended street postering as freedom of speech for people without access to mainstream media. Now that means most of us, because how many of us can afford to buy ads in the newspapers, and nobody reads the newspapers anymore. I don't know why they keep advertising in them, because the readership is just drop. Maybe it's because they're not paying attention, but there you have it. Anyway, every city in Canada fought this, and they lost. And the city of Toronto fought it, and they lost. So they had to come up with street poster bylaws. It took them a long time to do it. However, those bylaws are extremely well thought out, and they're eminently fair. That time was well spent. Street posters can't be larger than 8.5 by 11 inches. And anything larger than 8.5 by 11 inches doesn't belong on those kiosks. Now, if you go around Toronto, you'll find a lot of posters being put up that are 11 by 17 inches, and some of them are being put up by city-sponsored groups, which is like, here's the law, we don't have to keep it. Winston Churchill once asked the Admiral of the Navy to tell him the condition of the Navy on one side of an 8.5 by 11 inch piece of paper, double-spaced, which the man did. Now, if he could get everything important onto one 8.5 by 11 inch double-spaced piece of paper, that means, double-spaced in the lines, then we can too. And I use 8.5 by 11 inches. Most people don't. They go out with 11 by 17 inch posters, and they go out with a lot of them, and they cover me and everybody else when they're doing it. Now, if you can't share, as far as I'm concerned, you shouldn't be there, because this is about something for everyone. It's not about something for one person or one group or one business. It's not even about business. It's freedom of speech for people without access to mainstream media, and that means the poor. And the poor can't afford to pay people to do this stuff. And people will start out and they'll look up the street poster bylaws, and they'll produce posters that are within those bylaws. And then they find out that they're getting trashed. They'll find their posters torn up into bits of confetti and pasted behind people who are postering commercially. You see ads, your ad here, and the phone number. It's got 666 in front of it, which I don't know if that's accident or design, but 666 is the number of the beast. And beast devours without discrimination. They don't pay attention. They destroy. So the freedom of speech that the Supreme Court of Canada defended is being laughed at. by the people who choose to ignore the street poster bylaws. And I went out yesterday and I saw all my flyers that I had posted, which were all official size, torn up into small bits of confetti and pasted in clumps behind posters for a street poster service with the number of the beast on it. And when you looked at it, all my flyers bits of confetti go falling to the ground. The city complains that I'm littering the streets. I'm not littering the streets, but they won't do anything about it. Now, this has been going on for a long time, and the person posting those 666 flyers has been posting flyers that are anonymous, designed to incite violence upon their subjects. Canada's national newspaper, the Globe and Mail, did a story on this. And you would think that when the Globe and Mail does a story on something and says that someone's trying to incite violence against people, that our city councilors and our mayor would say, this is getting a little, this is too much. We got to put an end to this. Nope. They said we can't do anything about it. I read the laws, guys. There's a lot you can do about it. First off, posting anonymous flyers is illegal. You have to have the name of the person posting or organization posting the flyers on the flyer with contact information. And otherwise, they're illegal. Now, that's the first thing you can do. And, when you see I seem to be the odd man out in this city. And Ed Keenan, who's a damn fine writer for the Star, used to write for I Weekly before it folded. Ed Keenan walked in here to do a story on me, and he said, Reg, you're the only man in Toronto who stands up. And I said, no, there are others. And there are others, so don't go getting the impression I think I'm the only one. No, there are lots of other people who will stand up. It's just that our city council and our mayor's office won't stand up. Now, there's a big foo-for-ah about the fact that we're going to put Rob Ford's name on a stadium, and Rob Ford was a terrible person in the eyes of many people. Well, how many of us can say that we're not terrible? I mean, we don't all have someone trying to expose us to the light. Rob Ford certainly had someone trying to, and he gave them more than enough ammunition. But the thing about it is this: if you contacted Rob Ford's office, whether you were in his ward or not, he helped you. He called back. He helped. And for all of his bad habits, he had one goddamn good habit that erased all the rest. He listened. And how many of them do that? How many of them do that? Now, the city came in here, and a couple of guys came here on a night when I don't show films. I had a friend by here to, showing her a film by, it was private. And halfway through it, these two guys show up and say, we're here for the movie. Well, there's no movie scheduled. So I said, you guys are from the city. They said, don't shoot us, we're just a messenger. We got a complaint that you're showing films that sexually exploit children. Well, the film was Pier Paolo Pasolini's film Salò, and the children were not children, they were adults. And this film is available to get free of charge from every library in Toronto. But how many people know that? They see posters saying that you're exploiting children, and they go, oh, this is terrible, this is terrible. Well, it is terrible. But even more terrible is when it's a lie. Same person put up posters saying I showed a film called Boys in the Sand, which I did at Rochdale College, and I showed it because it was acclaimed around the world as the masterpiece that it is, and the boys in the sand are all grown men, but these posters go up saying I showed a film featuring underage boys in the sand, which is not quite kosher. But the important thing here is that I am one of the few people in this city who stands up. So don't go thinking I'm saying this because I'm going to try to get you to stand up, because if it's not in your nature, you ain't going to do it. And I know that. So I'm not speaking to you. I'm not speaking to anyone. One day I was out posting flyers with my dog Reefer, who was part shepherd, part collie, part lab mix. He'd been born in my home. And whenever I walked him without a lead, unless I was around people. And dogs that were chained to houses and other places would see us coming, and they would freak out and start barking, because there was a bond between me and my dog that wasn't between them and their master, and that bond is love. And one day I was out with him, and two dogs came charging across the road towards us, barking. And they got halfway across the road and realized what they had done was something they shouldn't have. And they turned to go back, and a car, the front and rear wheels of a car, ran over the smaller of the two dogs. I thought he would have been killed, but he wasn't. And he got up, to my surprise, and went and hid behind some wood leaning against a house. So I crossed the street with my guy. I asked him to sit, and he sat. And then I went to the dog that had got run over. I got down on all fours, and I moved the back of my hand towards him slowly, and I said, it's okay, it's okay. And he barked at me, rah, 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 rah. And the closer my hand got, the fiercer he got. And I said, it's okay. And finally, his jaws clamped down on my hand. And I said, it's okay. And in that instant, he stopped barking. And I looked at my finger, right there, right there, right there. And there was just the smallest dent in the flesh. That's how controlled that little dog that got run over by the front and rear wheels of a car was in his pain. That's how controlled. That's a miracle. And his owner came out, and I told her what had happened, and she said, thank you. Now here's the deal. We live in a world filled with people who've been run over. They've been hurt. And they're crying, and they're screaming, and they're angry. They're all the things we are when we get hurt and no one's around to listen. And they're doing damage. Because when people are hurt, they do damage. My mother was Church of England. My father was Roman Catholic. And my mom married my dad on the condition she'd raise all of us kids as Catholics, except she fell down and broke her word. I'm the oldest. And when it came time for me to go to school, there was a big battle between my dad's mom and my mom about whether I go to Catholic school or public school. I can still hear them screaming. And my mom finally said, why don't we let him decide? No one could argue with that. So she got me home by herself late at night when no one's around, and she said, do you want to go to public school with the good kids or a Catholic school with the bad kids? So you can guess where I went. And I came home that first day, and all of my Catholic cousins, who were legion, large families, greeted me with sticks, stones, and names. And I became an outsider. And I realized in that moment, 6 years old, that people who are our friends one moment can turn against us the next for no apparent good reason. So I decided that from then on, I would walk alone. And I've been alone ever since. Now, I'm not alone, but I choose to be alone. And I've never really looked at the idea of getting married, because as much as I love my mother, the thought of being married to someone like her is just, sorry, I'm not doing that. I never understood why young people get married. I mean, you see your parents, it clearly does not work. What's going on here? But, you know, most people just do it, whatever, because it's expected. And God, sometimes the worst thing you can do is what is expected. But what is expected is that when people are putting anonymous flyers up around the city that trying to get their subjects murdered, most of whom are people of the street who are helpless, that you goddammit do something about it. One fellow running for council came in here and he said, I've seen those posters attacking you, they're hate. Why aren't the police doing something about it? I said, the police are doing what they can. When you get in office, you do something. Well, he did get into office and he didn't do anything. And there you have it. Now, this is a matter that's before the courts because I was able to get video of the person posting this stuff. So you'd think he'd be smart and just, start being a decent human being because, his goose is cooked. No. He's got to go out there and, do destruction, not just to me. You have to bear that in mind. The Globe and Mail, when that fellow called me, Oliver Moore, he said, I did my homework on this. It's bogus. I said, well, can I do a story? I said, on condition that you include the other people being attacked, the history of this. Because if you don't, people will just say it's a feud between him and I. And he did. He made it clear that this is other people. I'm not the only one being attacked. And the dumb idiots that talk about this go, it's a feud. These two old guys, it's a feud. Stay out of it. Yeah, stay out of it. Well, stay out of it. I don't want your fucking help. Pardon my English, but they're just... Toronto is a city that's dying. Oh, that's a dramatic statement. Yeah, well, I got news for you. When I first came to Toronto, the day I arrived in this city, the morning, my high school principal said to me, I was 17, you got the wrong attitude. If you leave school today, you'll starve it 2 weeks. Now, how am I going to know if I don't leave? So I left. And then by chance, I began doing my programs and sharing my films with people. And in 1968, a mother and father brought their 2 sons and daughter to Toronto from the States to keep her sons from being turned into hamburger in Vietnam. And that was Jane Jacobs and her husband, Robert Jacobs. And they became my friends. And 2 years after I first met her, I saw an article in the paper and discovered that she'd written a book called The Death and Life of Great American Cities. So I read it, and I read it more than once. And people say they have a hard time understanding her book. And I said to her son, Jimmy, the people who say they have a hard time understanding your mother's book are all middle class, upper middle class. And she wrote that book from the perspective of the dirt poor. That's why they don't understand it. They're absolutely powerless. And Jimmy says, yeah, we were dirt poor when she wrote that book. And in an interview in 1969, Mrs. Jacobs said that Toronto is not a dead city. It's a very vibrant city with incredible life on the streets, but that at the top there's a very high level of mediocrity. Well, that's not always been true, but it's been pretty much true. This is my cat. Ask him, who was born here. What's his name? Ask him. There is a very high level of mediocrity, and that can't be changed. That's entrenched. When I came here, the city had just killed Gerrard Street Village, which was a cultural hub between Bay and Yonge, and it was in the process of killing the Bohemian Embassy, which was one of the most vital spots this city ever saw, and in the process of killing Yorkville Village, which was too much for everyone down there. And Rochdale College had just opened up. And over the years, I've watched one vibrant hub of activity after another get trounced in this city. Just forget about it. Ed Keenan wrote a story about how property taxes on Yonge Street had gone up 500%. Why? Because they built these huge high towers, and that automatically raises the value of all the property on the street. That means that folks that own property on Yonge Street are now paying 500% more than they were paying before these buildings went up. A friend of mine was in Spain, and an old man in a small town said, "Where are you from?" And she said, "Village of tall buildings." He said, "Money laundering." And there you have it. I'm not saying it's money laundering. I'm saying that's what that old man in Spain said to my friend. However, Toronto is dying. The taxes in this city are high, and they're going to get higher. People seem to think the rich can afford to pay them. Well, the rich don't pay them. They pass them on down to the folks on the ground. And jobs are going to become scarcer and scarcer and scarcer. After COVID hit, people couldn't work in their offices. They had to work from home and stay away from each other. And guess what? They liked it. So now we've got office towers that are sitting empty. And we've got condominiums going up, which is just insane. And those are expensive. And they're going to be sitting empty because the taxes on those things are so high that people won't be able to afford them. Eventually, the city will start housing the homeless in condominiums because the homeless are going to get more and more and more. You think what's happening over here on College Street by St. Stephen's in the Fields, God bless Maggie, is an anomaly? What's happening in the parks is an anomaly? Ha, ha, ha. No. When a person starts to die, everything starts with the extremities and then moves in towards the center. And the extremities are withering. Withering. I mean, I read Mrs. Jacobs' books. I thought about her ideas. And people go, "I'd go to your programs if you wouldn't talk. I don't want to hear you talk." Well, I took Mrs. Jacobs to see a movie, and she enjoyed it. And when I brought her home, she said, "Would you care for a coffee or a tea?" And I said, "Sure." And she invited me inside. And she didn't give me a coffee or a tea. She pulled 6 beer out of the fridge. 6. We're going to do some serious drinking. And we did. And it was marvelous. And out of the blue, she said, "For me, the best part of what you offer is what you have to say." And I said to her, "Hearing that from you is better than getting an Academy Award." And she said, "I wouldn't say that." I said, "I would. I know the caliber of the people who vote on those things." Now, Jane Jacobs listened to Reg Hartt. The people in charge right now aren't listening to Reg Hartt. My calls and emails are going unanswered. But they're not listening to you either. They're not listening to any of this. And they're driving the vehicle they're in over a cliff. So if you're on that vehicle, get off it, and get off it now. Mrs. Jacobs said, if you see something wrong being done and you do nothing about it, you kill a part of yourself. I've seen wrong being done for a long time in this city, and I've spoken up against it. And our city councilors and almost all of our mayors have said there's nothing we can do except for one. And that one was Rob Ford, the one that everybody is getting, well, not everybody, but a lot of folks are getting their in a ringer because we're going to name an exhibition stadium after him. Like I said, he had his sins, but God damn it, he was there for us. He had love in his heart. You know, in the Gospels, Jesus is invited into a Pharisee's home. This was like an academic at the University of Toronto or York or Ryerson, Toronto Metropolitan University. Now, whatever. Some person who thought a lot of himself invites Jesus into his home. And most people don't realize it, but Jesus was a peasant, a dirt poor peasant from the boonies, from Galilee. It's a saying, does anything good come from Galilee? And he invites Jesus into his home. And they used to, sit reclining and talk to each other. And a prostitute comes in off the street, and she anoints the head of Jesus with oil, and she washes his feet with her hair and tears. And the Pharisee says to himself, if this man knew what kind of woman this is, he wouldn't let her touch him. And Jesus says to him, hey, you invited me into your home. You didn't offer me anything to wash myself with. And she's come in and she's anointed my head with oil for my burial, and she's washing my feet with her hair and tears. And her sins, which are many, are forgiven, because she has such great love. And Rob Ford's sins, which are many, have been forgiven, because that man, big as he was even bigger in his heart. And he was filled with love. And this is Reg Hartt in Toronto, speaking up for someone that I feel should be spoken up for. That's Rob Ford. And do I expect our city councillors and whatnot to give a shit about the fact that my posters are being torn up into confetti? And if you're putting up flyers for your events and they're the legal size and everything else, that they're being torn up into confetti? Hell, I got a phone call from an arts organization saying they would like me to, they're doing a Bugs Bunny concert thing, Bugs Bunny with orchestra. They wanted me to put them up beside my cartoon festival posters. And I said, sure, as long as they conform to city bylaws. And they said, sure, and they're happy to do it. So I'm putting them up. And they get a phone call from 666, number of the beast, saying if you use Reg Hartt, the city is going to charge you. You should use me. And they told me about it. I got the emails. And guess what? They were charged with the city for using Reg Hartt. Well, despite all of this apathy and the seats of the high and the mighty, Toronto is a city that I love with my heart. So I'm not going anywhere. I'm here. And I'm going to stay here. Why? Because this is too great a city to lose, man. It's just too great to lose. I love Toronto. And I'm going to go down to Rob Ford Stadium when it opens and give thanks. Thank you.